Bridgerton Season 4 just pulled off the most shameless Cinderella retelling in television history, and the wild thing is how perfectly they disguised it under all that Regency glamour. But what's even more insane is how the show took every single beat from the classic story and made it fit so seamlessly into the tone that you almost didn't notice they were copying. Starting with the obvious setup, Sophie is literally Cinderella with a Regency makeover. She's the illegitimate daughter of an earl, born with noble blood, but society refuses to acknowledge it. Her father dies, and immediately, her stepmother, Araminta, swoops in to strip away every piece of dignity Sophie has left, with no inheritance, education, or freedom, just servitude in her own former home, while her stepsisters get to parade around in silk. It's the same trajectory as the original fairy tale, where a high-born girl is reduced to rags and ashes by a woman who weaponizes her authority. But here's where it gets super similar, because in Cinderella, the evil stepmother Lady Tremaine's cruelty is never random. She keeps Cinderella small on purpose, because Cinderella's grace, beauty, and quiet nobility would outshine her own daughters the moment she's allowed to be seen. And in Bridgerton, Araminta does the exact same thing to Sophie, but through Regency social rules instead of fairy tale malice. Sophie's very existence as the illegitimate daughter of an earl is a threat. If society remembers who she really is, her daughter's marriage prospects collapse. So Araminta doesn't just mistreat Sophie, she erases her, keeps her invisible, keeps her in servitude, because the moment Sophie is allowed to stand beside them as an equal, she outshines them without even trying. Another striking detail you may have missed are the servant bells in episode 4, when Araminta uses the bells to call on Sophie's help. The exact same bell system appears in Cinderella when Lady Tremaine summons Cinderella without ever calling her by name. These bells weren't decorative. In grand houses, bell pull systems were installed so the lady of the house could ring for servants from any room, with each bell signaling where they were needed. It was a built-in tool of hierarchy, and the meaning of that detail is easy to overlook. When someone is summoned by a bell, they are no longer being treated as a person in the household. They are being treated as staff. Both Cinderella and Sophie live in houses they once belonged to, yet they are called upon like servants, expected to appear the moment they're rung for. It's a quiet but powerful reminder of their position. They are present in the home, visible in every room, doing the work in plain sight, scrubbing floors, carrying trays, tending to others, constantly reminded that they live there but no longer belong there. Another beautiful parallel happens in the quiet preparation before the ball. In Cinderella, Cinderella begins sewing her own dress from scraps she finds in the attic, piecing together something hopeful out of what's been forgotten. She doesn't have magic yet, just determination, and the mice and birds gently finish what she started. In Bridgerton, Sophie follows the same path. She hand-makes her own mask. She asks Alfie to search the attic, where he finds an old gown that once belonged to the house, and from there the quiet transformation begins. Alfie finishes sewing the mask Sophie started by hand, while Irma gently fixes her hair into an elegant updo. The animals become house staff, the fairy tale becomes realism. Everything in both stories leads to this one moment, the ball. The only difference is that in Bridgerton, Violet Bridgerton hosts a masquerade. Faces are hidden, identities are blurred. In the original Cinderella, there's no mask. The magic itself hides who she is. But in A Cinderella Story, the dance becomes a Halloween ball, and Sam, the Cinderella of that story, wears a delicate white mask that looks strikingly similar to Sophie's lace one. In both scenes, the mask allows the heroine to be seen without being recognized, and the romantic moment happens away from the crowd, under softly glowing lights in a gazebo-like garden setting. Different eras, different settings, but the same storytelling device. Anonymity creates the space for real connection. And this is where the parallel becomes impossible to miss, even though there are many more which you will see. In both Cinderella and Bridgerton, the man never learns her name at the ball. Their entire connection happens in anonymity. She has to leave suddenly because she must be back before midnight, before her reality is exposed. And as she runs, she leaves behind the one thing that proves she was ever there. A glass slipper in one story, a glove in the other. This is one of the most recognizable Cinderella tropes in storytelling. The mysterious girl, the midnight departure, the forgotten item, and the man left searching for a woman he cannot identify. And if viewers hadn't consciously noticed the Cinderella pattern earlier, this is the moment where it clicks. Another subtle parallel appears in the character of the kind sister. In many retellings of Cinderella, especially in later adaptations, one of the stepsisters, Anastasia, is portrayed as softer, more conflicted, and eventually capable of kindness toward Cinderella. She's still part of the cruel household, but she's not entirely heartless. In Bridgerton, Posey fills this exact role. While Rosamund mirrors the openly cruel sister, Posey shows moments of quiet empathy. And the clearest example is when Sophie is kicked out of her own home, and Posey secretly gives her the valuable shoe clips to pawn, providing her with the means to escape. Just like Anastasia, Posey becomes the one person in the house who sees Sophie as a human being rather than a servant, offering help in small but meaningful ways. At this point, the parallels stop feeling like coincidence and start feeling deliberate, because when you line up the characters side by side, the mapping is almost exact. Cinderella becomes Sophie, the prince becomes Benedict, Lady Tremaine becomes Araminta, the cruel stepsister Drizella becomes Rosamund, the softer, kinder sister Anastasia becomes Posey, and even the tiny animal helpers who help Cinderella get ready for the ball are mirrored by Alfie and Irma, the loyal servants who quietly help Sophie prepare. Once you see this alignment, it becomes much easier to recognize that we're not just watching similar scenes, we're watching the same story told through different people. And the clearest proof of this comes from Benedict himself. In Cinderella, before Cinderella ever enters the ballroom, the prince is already bored. Surrounded by perfectly eligible young women, he looks uninterested, distracted, almost yawning at the spectacle in front of him. Nothing in the room captures his attention. And in Bridgerton, Benedict walks into the masquerade to the exact same energy. Women immediately surround him, calling Mr. Bridgerton, trying to engage him, but he walks straight past them without a second glance. The scene tells us the same thing in both stories. The right woman is not here yet. Then she enters, and in both cases, the shift is immediate. His body language changes. His eyes lock onto one person in a crowded room. Everyone else fades into the background. The prince sees Cinderella. Benedict sees Sophie. It's staged the same way visually, a room full of people, but only one person exists in his line of sight. A direct visual echo that's hard to ignore once you notice it. But the parallel doesn't stop there. After she disappears, both men do something that makes the fairy tale unmistakable. The prince goes door to door across the kingdom with the glass slipper, refusing to give up until he finds the girl from the ball. And Benedict does the Regency version of the same thing. He searches all of London with nothing but a glove and a memory. He rejects other matches. He becomes fixated on the mystery woman. He cannot move on from a night where he felt something real with someone whose name he doesn't even know. And then comes one of the most painful parallels of all. He meets her again and doesn't recognize her. In Cinderella, when she is back in rags, she is invisible. The prince would never look twice at her in that state because society has taught him not to see women like that. And in Bridgerton, Sophie stands in front of Benedict in servant clothes, and he looks right at her without realizing she is the woman he's been searching for. The disguise was never the gown, it was never the mask. It was status, class, position. In both stories, he has to learn how to truly see her, not as a servant, not as background, but as the woman he already fell in love with. What makes this parallel even deeper is that in both stories, the ending is not really about romance, it's about liberation. In Cinderella, marriage isn't simply a happy ending, it's freedom. It's Cinderella finally leaving a house where she was treated as invisible and stepping into a life where she is seen, valued, and protected. And the exact same thing happens in Bridgerton. When Sophie marries Benedict, she isn't just gaining a husband, she is gaining safety, status, a place in the world where no one can reduce her to a servant again, because the moment she becomes a Bridgerton, everything changes. If Araminta, or anyone, ever tried to mistreat her again, she wouldn't be standing alone. She would be standing behind an entire family that would defend her without hesitation. For the first time in her life, Sophie doesn't just gain love, she gains sisters, a mother figure, a household where she belongs, the very thing she dreamed of as a child but never had. And this is another classic Cinderella resolution that Bridgerton quietly mirrors. The heroine is rejected by her blood family, but embraced by a chosen one. Cinderella leaves her stepfamily behind and is welcomed into the palace. Sophie leaves Araminta's house and is welcomed into the Bridgerton home. It's not just a change of address, it's the fulfillment of the same fairy tale promise: to be seen, to be safe, and to finally belong.